I'm really happy to see so many of you here. Even 2 weeks ago, I was worried that we only had a handful of sign up, and it's just kind of part of this post-COVID world. Everybody's waiting till the last minute, but I'm still very happy to see all of you because tonight's program was kind of my idea in that I missed when Nicolas spoke for us in July of 2021 when he became the head of the president of and CEO of the Hong Kong Exchange. And I was traveling then. I was in the States, and I did see the video. It was, if in fact, I think so, I still use your quote, "Best day for Hong Kong is yet to come," and I still believe that firmly. And so I'm really delighted that, almost 3 years after that, and also, Nicolas has done programs at Asia Society in New York. I think as the head of Exchange, the famous red taxi, who he kind of brought to New York and London when he opened up the offices there. So he is no stranger to Asia Society, and because he's also our global trustee, and been involved with Asia Society from the first day he set foot in Hong Kong. So we're really happy to have this return visit, and very delighted also, and a good friend of Asia Society. I did not check on her membership status, and she fessed up that she let her membership lapse. So I remember things like this. So Veronique, you're on my list. Veronique, Professor Veronique Lafon-Vinais, who, in the 90s when she arrived, she was a frequent, like all of you, very frequent visitor to our program. So I'm really delighted to have Veronique back to help moderate this discussion, and feel free to ask questions later in the Q&A. But since I have you, and you guys are the first to know, but before I make two announcements, can I see a show of hand who are members of Asia Society Hong Kong? Okay, good. Because the two programs that I want to announce, you'll see it in this week's EDM, is our president, the new president of Asia Society, Dr. Kang, Kyung-Hwa Kang, former foreign minister of Korea. She will be making her first trip as president of Asia Society end of April. So she'll be speaking for us April 29th. We'll have a reception for her. And then those of you who are PC and corporate members are invited to join us if you are able to for the dinner on the 29th. So that's a PC, corporate member private dinner, off the record generally. And then she'll also speak for us on the 30th, a lunch program, a public program, which will be on the record. So 29th and 30th, keep that on your calendar. The exciting program that we're really happy to announce is that Jamie Dimon, Nicolas's former boss, will be speaking for us at a special dinner May 23rd. He is here to help celebrate JP Morgan's 100th anniversary in Hong Kong. And so we're very, very fortunate that we will have him speaking May 23rd, and he'll be speaking for us in the JC Hall. So space will be limited. In fact, instead of a ballroom, which we would have preferred, we will be doing it at JC Hall. So first come, first serve. So once the news goes out tomorrow publicly, we already have quite a few tables sold. So those of you who are corporates, want to get a table, please, we are happy to have you. So those are my announcements. And now I just want to invite the two speakers, Veronique and Gucho, to get the program started. You've seen their impressive resumes, and so I don't need to go into. But we're going to get the program started tonight, and enjoy the evening. And I look forward to seeing you at future programs. And thank you.
Okay, it looks like it's working. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much, Alice and Holly, for inviting me to conduct this discussion with Nicolas Aguzin, whom, as you know, is the former CEO of Hong Kong Exchange and barely needs any introduction. But Nicolas, I'm a little bit surprised. Mm-hmm. You're from Argentina, right?
Correct. Yes.
So how did you end up being the CEO of Hong Kong Exchange?
So, I mean, I was born in Argentina and did most of my early education in Argentina, and then I went to college in the U.S., then went back to Argentina for a few years, and just after college, I joined J.P. Morgan. I worked there for 31 years, and throughout my J.P. Morgan career, at one point, this was in 2012, Jamie Dimon reached out and said, "Hey, how about you going to Asia?" I was a little surprised because I have nothing to do with Asia. I mean, I was like doing Latin America at that point. And I said, like, that's interesting. Why me? And he said, no, I think you can do a good job. I mean, you've done a good job in Latin America. And so he asked me to come to Hong Kong. And so I was doing that. I was, CEO of Asia Pacific for J.P. Morgan in here. That was in December of 2012. And then a few years later, I was asked to run the international private bank. It required me to move to London because it's hard to do it from Hong Kong. It's much better to be closer to all the time zones. So I was, but then COVID hit and all these things, so we delayed that a little bit. And at that point, I just got a call and said, would you be interested in, being CEO of the Hong Kong exchange? And I never really thought about it, but I love the idea of connecting East and West and making sure that we generate the bridges and all that. And I thought that, doing that through something that I know very well, which is the finance sector, would have been exciting. And so I ended up doing that, and that was it.
Well, as you know, the Hong Kong SAR government is trying to attract more foreigners like you to come and study with us and work with us. And what do you think are the major stumbling blocks to that strategy?
Well, the biggest one just a couple of years ago was COVID. Hong Kong is an international city. It thrives based on connecting with different parts of the world, and the fact that people could not enter the city very easily was a blow to Hong Kong, I think. So that was really a tough thing for many people living here to digest, and then over time. I think in addition to COVID, we started seeing more and more of the geopolitics come into play, and the fact that, the connectivity with China, yes, it's great, but is China really going to do well or not? And some firms started having weaker results. So it wasn't as interesting from a financial point of view anymore. So that created a little bit of an issue. And so I do think that there are, let's say, political and geopolitical headwinds right now that we're confronting, in addition to the traditional, issues that we've faced over the last few years with COVID.
Yeah, that's definitely on the map, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better with the news about Iran, right? So talking a little bit about China, there is a lot of focus on the Greater Bay Area, right? So what's your outlook on the Greater Bay Area development?
Okay. So I think the Greater Bay Area is it's an initiative that, while it generated a ton of excitement at the beginning, it still haven't fully realized its potential. We're still at early days, but if you think about the possibilities, the fact that you have a place where you have a great financial center like Hong Kong, and then you have a great technology center with tons of research development like Shenzhen, and all of this with a GDP that is roughly the size of Italy. So the GBA is roughly the GDP of Italy, a little over $2 trillion right now. And then that's all within an hour of train. It's just remarkable. It's amazing. It's you have Wall Street on top of Silicon Valley, all in one place. You can add Las Vegas if you want, if you add Macau. So all in one place. Whenever I think about this, I think about growth, I think about innovation, I think about integration. This is the place where China and the West come together. and so I think it's a really good initiative with great potential, and we will have to wait until some of the initiatives that have been the government have been working over for some time, both the mainland government and the Hong Kong government. I mean, and until those start kicking in, things like Wealth Connect. I mean, some of those things are only starting to kick in. It'll take some time, the technology integration and all those things. So the potential is huge, but still early days to call it a complete success.
Well, I think Hong Kongers have realized the potential. They go there to shop now. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of people going shopping there. I mean, it's
So yeah, I mean, at Hong Kong X, there are many very successful schemes that you put in place to connect with the mainland. But what about beyond the mainland? I was reading the article about the interview with Laura Chia in today's South China Morning Post, in which she mentioned your trip together to the Middle East a couple of years ago, and putting in place some contacts. So what do you think are the potential there between Hong Kong and the Middle East?
Yeah, well, I mean, to have a great financial center, you need great clients, great investors, great participants, and Hong Kong, for the most part, had that. Almost all the big banks from around the world, the big institutions, are present in Hong Kong. So we have that. We have continued to add new products, and the quality of infrastructure is also pretty good. Now, what we've seen is that over the last few years, some investors from the US and Europe started pulling out a little bit, and that affected the markets, quite a bit. So it's very important to diversify the investor base. I mean, to continue expanding. People that have not traditionally looked at Hong Kong to start looking at Hong Kong. So I mean, there's a very logical place to look, which is Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Why Southeast Asia? Because of the proximity to China, to Hong Kong, and the affinity that there is in terms of having a free market, very, very close to countries that are, a big percentage of the business leaders in many countries in Southeast Asia are ethnically Chinese. They feel very identified with Hong Kong, and so that made a lot of sense. So we had lots of trips and events doing in Southeast Asia. Actually, the biggest company that listed in the market last year was a company from Indonesia, which is about a $15 billion market cap company. And so that's, I mean, and we did an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with IDX, the Indonesia Stock Exchange, whereby we will recognize them as a regulator, and therefore it makes it a little bit easier for companies to list here. And then we started having a lot of trips and investing time in the Middle East as well. I had, since COVID, the COVID reopening, I had 7 trips to the Middle East. I mean, so it's a lot. I mean, and it's just like there's so many things to do together. The complementarity of Middle East and China, Hong Kong, it's amazing, because they not only they have like a lot of money that they need to diversify and they want to invest in the region, they also want to make sure that they attract investors from this part of the world and technologies from this part of the world to invest in the Middle East, because they really want to develop their market. Hong Kong has been regarded a bit of as a technology hub, or at least as a listing venue for new economy companies. And so there's a lot of opportunities to really interact. I mean, just to give you a sense, PIF today has like a tiny portion of its assets invested in China through Hong Kong or directly, and they have about 700 billion under management, and they have probably about 1.5% invested in China. It's very, very small. They want to get to like 10%. But in reality, they think it should be like closer to 20%. But in their 2030 plan, they want to take it to 10%. Now, 10% of what they say will be 2.3 trillion in their 2030 vision, okay? That's 230 billion US dollars. If they achieve what they want to do, that means that they'll go from roughly 10 billion today to 230 billion. That's 23 times. Similar thing with all the sovereign wealth funds that you have in the Middle East. And in total, there's like 4 or 5 trillion. I mean, just taking the top 20 sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East. And that will go to like, I don't know, 15, 20 billion in the next 10 years. And if they achieve to get like to like 10%, 15%, and if they're just GDP weighted, I mean, remember, China today is like close to 20% of the global GDP. So they should be at like, 15 to 20%. But even if they get to 10%, that's going to be like, $1 trillion. I mean, 2 trillion US dollars. It's a lot. And the total amount invested by international investors in China today through the Connect schemes, and I mean, it's probably like about 1 trillion, 1.5 trillion. So if you get another trillion from the Middle East, that's like doubling what you have today. It's massive. That's why it's so important that we spend time on that front, diversifying the sources of, investors. But at the same time, the US and Europe continue being the largest market in the world. So we have to continue paying attention, and that's why we opened up our office in London, we opened up our office in the US, and we continue, we continue taking steps to be closer to the key clients.
Well, there are a lot of really interesting things that you mentioned, and one of these is fabulous numbers. But are they going to invest in the public market or in the private market?
It doesn't matter. Both are good, because I mean, if they invest in the private market, that's okay, because I mean, if those companies at some point they want liquidity and they'll go public. I mean, and when companies grow, I mean, it's just a good, whether they finance themselves in the private market, in the public markets. I mean, it doesn't quite matter for me. I think that the important thing is to create the right ecosystem. If you have companies investing in the private market, that's great as well. I mean, we have a lot of private equity firms in Hong Kong, and that's very, very healthy for the whole ecosystem as well.
Well, which brings me to the question of the public market, and we've seen a decline in the number of IPOs, not just in Hong Kong, but everywhere else. And yet, despite all this, under your leadership, Hong Kong Exchange has had very good results. So how can you explain that?
Yeah,
what did you do?
The numbers are fine. I mean, it's like, so essentially what it is, it's a bit of the diversification. I think the model that the exchange has is fabulous, actually. So yes, over the last 3 years, we had the best financial results in our history. I mean, it's been really, really good. Part of it was the growth of new products like derivatives. Historically, HKEX has been mostly a cash market business. And over the last few years, there were a lot of new products that were introduced on the derivatives front, including options on futures. The Hang Seng Tech Index was introduced just like 3.5 years ago. I mean, and that grew like exponentially. I mean, so there's been a lot of international derivatives that were implemented. We actually acquired the MSCI derivatives suite for Asia. So almost like 40 new products from across all of Asia. So we had record derivatives number. We had record fixed income number. So what happened is, with the increase in interest rates, a lot of the money shifted from equities into fixed income. And so people say, yes, the volume has come down a lot. It's true. I mean, if you look at the volume, it came down a lot. But the valuation of companies in Hong Kong and the mainland mostly, as a result of interest rate increases and all that, valuations have come down 50%. Actually, if you look at Hang Seng Tech Index, it came down like 60% since like the peak 3 years ago. So that's massive. The number of shares traded, it's about the same. It's just like the value has come down a lot. The market cap has come down a lot. And so besides fixed income, I mean, our FX franchise has actually, we're hitting record FX numbers. Our data and connectivity is also hitting records. So if you look at derivatives, fixed income, data, I mean, all those areas at record numbers. And that's what allowed, that diversification allowed the exchange to continue actually, printing really good results and having actually record financial performance. So I think that's very good. Now about the IPOs, I mean, I'll mention something. You mentioned the IPOs coming down. I mean, last year we had 76 IPOs, I believe, and the year before it was like 90, and the year before it was like 96. So it has been coming down, 96, 90, 76. But just to put it into context, those numbers are actually pretty good by international standards. I mean, it's not as good as like 150 or 200 when we had like the really, really good record years. But in comparison, those are like pretty healthy numbers. Now, what happened is, like, with valuations being so low, the companies that are listing are saying, I'm not going to put like a big chunk of my company in the public. I'm going to do the minimum possible because I don't like the price. When the price goes up, I'll put even more. So a lot is riding in terms of, as valuations recover, I think a lot of people will pull a lot more shares in the public markets, and it should be much better.
Well, linked to that, I mean, you were an investment banker, right? So is that a sunset industry?
It's a what? A what?
Is investment banking a sunset
industry? Oh, okay. No. I mean, it's like, no. I mean, what happened is that, yes. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, a lot of kids in school now that are looking for a lot of other opportunities. So when I graduated from college. Next year is going to be 35 years ago. I mean, it's investment banking was like amazing. It was like the best thing in the world. I mean, there's been a lot of new opportunities emerging over the last, I would say, decade or a couple of decades. Besides all the startups that are around, that so a lot of wealth being generated for a lot of young people. And a lot of publicity and a lot of excitement. So a lot of people are saying, no, I'll set up my own like startup. But they realize, very quickly that it's not that easy to just like become a billionaire. But and then you have like also the issue of private equity firms, venture capital, private equity. I mean, growth equity. I mean, that has even now private credit. That generated an opportunity of wealth creation for students coming out of college, that they said, well, it's not only investment banking, it's also that there's other places that could be really interesting. And it's true. I mean, they do generate incredible wealth creation opportunities. Now, I still think investment banking is very interesting. You learn a lot, you advise a lot of companies, you can see the value creation in companies. Just like consulting is also super interesting. But it depends. I mean, you have to like it.
So what's your outlook for the global capital markets in 2024?
Okay. I think IPOs will still be a bit slow. I mean, we still have interest rates at very high levels. I mean, people are talking about potentially cutting interest rates in the short term. I mean, is it going to be in July? I mean, when is it going to be? But I mean, I think we're focusing too much on the short-term interest rate, which is not that important, actually, especially for company valuations. The important thing is the long-term rate. I mean, when you look at the 10-year, it just hit 4.5% this morning. So 4.5%, that's pretty high. And I think there's a chance it gets even higher. I think that capital markets will be, recovering, but still a little bit soft in 2024. But over the medium term, especially around this region, I mean, I have this theory that in the next 10 years, capital markets in China actually are going to be very, very significant. And of course, geopolitics will still play a role, and there will be a lot of pushback from a lot of global investors. But the opportunity for let's say creation in terms of like reallocation of money and wealth that Chinese people have, that today is mostly invested in two things: real estate. The home ownership in China is over 90%. And the second thing is, and they have all of it in almost like in cash without any mortgages, very limited mortgage. And then you have also a lot of people putting just their money in the bank. I mean, there's like, a significant amount of capital just like held in savings accounts and checking accounts, and some of that will be diverted to the capital markets, which will create a very exciting, vibrant market for the future. So I'm quite optimistic about this part of the world, although it's not 2024. It may take a little longer, but that's why I always focus on the next decade.
Well, back 3 years ago, you were concerned about inflation when you were talking with Ronnie. Right. So what do you think about inflation now?
So it was interesting when we had that conversation that Alice referred to 3 years ago. He asked me what was I worried about, and at that point, inflation was still totally under control. It was okay. There was a little blip at that around the month that we had the event 3 years ago, and everyone was saying, "Oh, this is just like temporary. This is like it's going to go down in the next quarter or something." And my comment was that I was actually concerned about inflation because, first of all, there's so much printing going on around the world. I mean, and specifically during the COVID era, there was a lot of printing in the U.S. That coupled with quite a bit of, let's say, active policies from the government and generating significant deficits. I mean, the deficits are pretty high in the U.S. They're around like 7% of GDP, and as interest rates go up, they'll have to spend even more. I mean, so I think the bias towards printing, or this new idea that you can print money and it has no impact. Maybe I'm again biased because I'm from Argentina. I mean, it's like the reality is that it's I think it's very risky once you start printing, and that starts building into the psyche of people that prices will rise. I mean, that's really dangerous. That's why at that point I was concerned about inflation expectations. I mean, principally, I think inflation expectations it's going up. Everyone is now in the U.S. is asking for higher price. So I think that is something that is still concerning. That's why I think there may be some short-term interest rate cuts, but over the long term, be prepared for 5% rates for a long time. In terms of but not inflation rate, interest rates. I mean, long-term interest rates of around 5%, which is not super high by historical standard. I mean, that's kind of reasonable. But it's a new world because most of the debt that the U.S. has, and the U.S. has 120% of GDP now in debt. That debt is mostly at 1%, 1.5%. They're still refinancing. As they refinance all that debt year by year, and the duration is on average 7 years. So as that debt is refinanced, it's being refinanced at 4 to 5%. So it's gonna eventually hit. And this is with unemployment at 3.9%. When you have a slowdown in the economy, in the U.S., you have a lot of like automatic payments, employment benefits, welfare payments, etc. So expenses will go up a lot. So if the deficit is now 7%, imagine when expenses go up. Revenues, by the way, when there's a recession, they come down. Revenue comes down because there's less tax revenue. So revenues coming down, expenses going up, and then interest expense is going to go up a ton every year more and more and more. So that's scary.
So will the U.S. be downgraded?
They have been already downgraded even more. I mean, it's like so. I think the U.S. dollar is still incredibly powerful, and it's like it's just like a great currency, because it's like the currency of preferred interactions and the reserve currency of the world. So I just think that will be a little less confidence potentially, and that may generate people potentially moving a little bit away, and that could generate even inflation at some point.
So what keeps you awake now?
I'm sleeping pretty well now.
And here I
But,
was waiting for a
it's like
scoop. You gave Ronnie a scoop 3 years ago. I want one.
No. I mean, obviously, I'm very concerned about all the geopolitical risks that we have right now, and we've seen an acceleration of some risks over the last 24, 48 hours with the drone attack in Israel. I mean, if the Middle East turns out to be a full-out war, I mean, that's going to be very negative. I think anything that affects global trade and interactions between nations, I think it's negative. And all we have elections this year in the U.S. I'm very pleased that I'm not an American citizen and I'm not forced to choose. But that's also going to generate quite a bit of noise, because I mean there's clearly more and more polarization, and so that's an issue that also concerns me a bit.
Well, there's election. Half of the world's population is voting this year. So let me change tack a little bit. And you had a part of your career in private banking, right? So I have to ask, can you tango?
Can I tango? Okay. So
I should ask you why.
During COVID, I mean, we did take some tango lessons. I mean, with YouTube. I mean, while we were locked in a room, and so. But she will probably say that I cannot tango. But anyhow.
Well, I heard that ballroom dancing was a necessary skill for private banking in Hong Kong.
Okay, I didn't know that.
You didn't know? That must be a legend.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the drivers for growth in private banking in Asia?
In Asia? Well, it's wealth creation. I mean, it's when I think about Asia in general, I mean, more and more of the global GDP is shifting towards Asia, and I'm being, generic about Asia here because it obviously includes all the way from India, Southeast Asia, I mean Japan, Korea, I mean the whole thing. And so I think that as more and more wealth is being created, and there's like wealth shifting from generation to generation, I mean that's like the most important driver. I mean, when you look at the number of billionaires, for example, coming out of Asia, it's like, other than the U.S., there's no other country in the world that is generating as many billionaires. So that's an important driver. Then the other thing is making sure that you have like opportunities for investment, and given how many new companies are emerging in this part of the world and the role that technology is playing, there's also a lot of investment opportunities. And so when you look at all those things, I mean, Asia is a great place to be a private banker and to develop that business.
And you mentioned technology, so I have to ask, what do you think about AI?
AI, I mean, it's actually transforming a lot of industries. I mean, I just look at, for example, the HKEX and all the things that we were doing and continue to do around like using AI to make sure that, for example, when you look at companies that are listed, you need to check that they meet all the regulatory requirements, that every announcement on the public announcement has been already disclosed to the market in a consistent way, that they're not breaching any regulation compared with what they filed. I mean, all of that is almost impossible by a human being to do. And so it's great, I mean, from a market surveillance and, checking to use AI. At the same time, there are new algorithms that are being developed into the market through the use of AI. I mean, and when you think about the coding that companies need to do to develop their own platforms and software, it can be done so much faster, so much more efficient, and also the testing. The testing can now be done in a much better way. So when you think about implementing new system, new infrastructure, a lot of time and effort goes in testing those systems to make sure that they actually work as they were intended to. And AI can expedite that, massively. So, but to have AI, you need to have a lot of stuff in the cloud so that it's being processed efficiently. So you have a few things, but that are kind of linked. I mean, data, cloud, and AI, they all go together, and they kind of are each one of those depends on each other.
Well, a final question before I open the floor to the audience to ask their own question. And I have a few students teaching in the audience. Thank you very much, Alice and Holly, for that. What advice would you give to my lovely students here for a career in finance?
For a career in finance. I mean, I love the idea of thinking about how the financial markets can really help the real economy. I mean, that's for me, it's a key purpose that I see in everything that I do every day. It's not just about making money. I mean, it's not about just having a market for the sake of having a market, but every time we're thinking of, for example, about a new listing regime, we're thinking about the companies that can come to the market, how you can be funding the companies of tomorrow. I'll give you an example. For example, the biotech chapter that we launched a few years ago, we had 120 biotechnology companies listing Hong Kong, raising, it was over 100 billion Hong Kong dollars. Half of those companies, about 60 of those companies, had no revenues. And those companies were discovering amazing, pharmaceuticals, drugs that are saving lives and doing great things for our society. So how you link the real economy with the financial sector, that's what's very exciting. So, or at least that's, my purpose, and that's what I think is super interesting. So, I mean, people usually think of finance as Wolf of Wall Street or something like that, which is very different than what I experienced during my life. And it's the possibility of actually helping the economies grow, helping create value for a society, and in my case also taking the job of HKEX, it was trying to make sure that we can continue having dialogue between East and West. I mean, we were talking with Alice, just before the panel, that I mean, it's so hard now to just have people just talk to each other, communicate, and share ideas. Well, through the world of finance, we can convince because investors, they want the good opportunities. So by creating those opportunities, you can have people invest. If they invest in Hong Kong, if they invest in the mainland, I mean, it's great. They have something at risk, and therefore they learn about it. They'll try to understand what makes that, company tick, what makes it move. Similar the other way around, I've always wanted to encourage more outbound investment from China. Today, I mean, Chinese investors, they only save 1 to 2% in international assets. It's tiny, 1 to 2% of all the asset management in China is international assets. That should be 10% at least. And so we created a lot of programs, and we actually managed to get a regulatory change, which is that companies, I mean, investors in China typically are not allowed to invest overseas. Now, as a result of a change that we had last year, for the first time ever, they were allowed to invest in international companies that are listed in Hong Kong. Unlimited amount, which hopefully over the next few years will be a key differentiating factor for HKEX to be listing venue of choice for companies that want to go public. Today it's a little tough because of everything that's going on, but but the conditions are there to have like 30 trillion, 40 trillion of capital, that is the size of capital markets in the mainland, that now can go overseas if they buy companies that are listed in Hong Kong. So it's a great opportunity, fantastic. No other market in the world gives you that. Like the best investors from all over the globe and the best investors from the mainland. So I would still put some bets in Hong Kong.
That's wonderful. Okay, audience participation is graded.
Yeah.
Okay, the gentleman in the front. Can we get a mic, or can you just shout, or?
Thank you again.
Oh,
For the insights along over the last multiple years and the continuous sharing in your current role. I'm Gary, and financial analyst in Hong Kong. The question is, how would you suggest China to develop its capital market? We are in the moment where, NFRA has been formed, CSRC have a new chairman, issuing a list of tightening measures, trying to regulate it. And it doesn't seem like they are in the moment that feel very ready to open the capital account control for sure. And under that conditions, what is the right path that China can develop, and what is the right role that Hong Kong can continue to serve as its need? Thank you.
Yeah. So the mainland likes to be very, very careful in the way they approach opening up to international markets. And one of the reasons for being so careful is that anything that they don't have like full understanding of how it works, I mean, they're a bit sensitive. So if they cannot control the regulatory bodies, they don't like to allow a lot of investments by retail from the mainland to actually be subject to that. Because if something happens, those people, may be unhappy and they may have nothing to do with it. So it's a different system, and they tend to have like a lot more control of, what's going on there. Over the years, I think Hong Kong has done a great job in terms of like convincing the mainland regulators to allow them to invest in Hong Kong, saying, listen, you should trust our regulatory systems, you should trust our structures, and we've seen a ton of progress because we've had ETF Connect, we had Swap Connect, we had like a lot of new initiatives that were intended to allow more of this international capital to flow through Hong Kong, this Chinese capital to flow to international markets through Hong Kong. Now, they need to continue developing products. Derivatives is something that has been growing very fast. They're very, very careful about that because they don't fully, know the potential implications of that. Remember that the US and Hong Kong and all these markets, we've had that capital markets for over 100 years. And in China, it's only been in the last 30, 35 years. I mean, so it's a relatively new market that needs to evolve, needs to mature. So there will be new products being introduced as time goes by. As investors feel more comfortable hedging that exposure, that would generate even more activity. And the other very important thing that will allow people to invest a bit more aggressively in capital markets is to create a network of a safety net for, for example, for retirement that today in China you don't have. But now there is a new initiative around generating a pension system that complements the state-owned pension system with private pension system. That has two huge benefits. One, all that pension money then has to be invested. And that could be, if you think about Australia with the superannuation funds, or you think about the US with the 401ks and the growth of the pension market, that should be gigantic. But the most important thing is not the investment of those institutional investors, those asset managers, is the fact that people will feel confident that they have a safety net for the future. Today, people don't feel they have a safety net. So what they do is they put cash in the bank. Chinese people love to have cash in the bank. And they love to have their own home with no mortgage. And that's like the opposite of the US. In the US, people have like debt. Because they have the safety net. They have all this 401k, all these plans for the future and all that. So if we create the right safety net that would generate huge improvements in the capital market. And then if you just look at the percentage of capital market as a percentage of GDP, usually if you look at capital markets as debt capital market plus equity capital markets, as a percentage of GDP in most developed countries is like 500 to 600% of GDP. Okay, in China today it's like 120%, 130%. So imagine the potential if that goes to like from like 130% to like 500% or 600%, like most countries are there. I mean, that would mean that it's like another $100 trillion of capital markets. So that the potential is definitely there. They just need to put, some of these things in place. And about, the restructuring of all the public sector in China, CSRC, etc. They've been, reaccommodating a lot of like these roles and who does what, and trying to coordinate regulation. That requires like some, training and like making sure that people are communicating right. So it'll take a little bit of time, but I'm confident they'll get it right.
Okay, the gentleman in the front.
Thank you for some very interesting remarks from both Nicolas and Veronique. Nicolas, if you had a magic wand, what top 2 policy recommendations would you have for the Hong Kong government, sort of for the benefit of Hong Kong? What would be like the 2 things you would do if you could?
Okay. All right. I'll mention just like some. The first one is to continue pushing Hong Kong's role as an international center. I mean, the beauty of Hong Kong is that it's part of China, but it's still an international city. So it's the most international city of China and the most Chinese city outside of the mainland. That is like unique. No one else can replicate that. So it's very important that we continue highlighting that uniqueness. So the beauty is in the difference, not in the similarities with the mainland. How can you do the best for China? How can you do the best for Hong Kong? By highlighting the fact that Hong Kong is very unique and international. And so I think we need to keep pushing that. And they are like working on that, but continuing to attract international people, making sure that this is an environment that it's easy to do business. I mean, so I think that would certainly be one of the top in my list. Let's see, the second Wanda wave that I would have. I mean, if I can make anything happen, it's clearly the geopolitical pressure that there is on Hong Kong today. It's huge. I mean, I'm not sure I know exactly what are the steps that they need to take, but we need to ease some of that pressure because, I mean, Hong Kong thrives on the international market, okay? So we need to make sure that we continue attracting and we need to, of course, continue focusing on Europe and the US, but the corridor that I call it the diagonal of growth that goes all the way from starting with China, Southeast Asia, India, Middle East, Africa, Latin America. If you think about that corridor, it has all the energy that you need. You have all the food that you need because you have countries like Brazil, Argentina. I mean, they that have all the grain in the world. You have all the lithium, cobalt, copper, iron ore. I mean, everything that you may need. You have like the sustainability framework by having all these huge forests in Indonesia and Malaysia and like Latin America that it's incredible. You have the population growth that may be missing perhaps in China, but you have it in Africa, in Latin America, Southeast Asia. So when you look at this as like I call it the diagonal of growth, it's amazing. You have everything that you need. You have some countries that like have like great technology that can be applied the rest of the world. Now Hong Kong, as a result of its currency that is linked to the US dollar as a result of its governance, institutions, history, as a result of its common law framework. It's perfect at the free flow of capital. You can move capital in and out without any limitations. It's in an incredible position to leverage and be the super connector of all this region. So I would try to exploit that as much as we can, that diagonal of growth. So I know that the SAR government has been trying to do that. We've been trying to do it as HKEX. So we just have to continue.
Well, just listening to you is so enthusiastic. Okay, more questions. Only 2 people have raised their hand. Okay, another gentleman in the middle.
Kevin Rideout from Hong Kong Stock Exchange.
Ooh. Oh.
Former employee of Gucho and now just a super fan. So, did a great job for Hong Kong Exchange. Over the time that I was at the exchange, I've been almost 10 years now, and what I have to tell you is that before you joined, Hong Kong government was not Hong Kong government. It was different departments of Hong Kong government. And what I mean by that is the SFC, HKMA, FSTB, Hong Kong Exchange, we all operated so independently, the collaboration was not there. And I just wondered if you could share with the audience a little bit, sorry to put you on the spot, I didn't prepare you, how you managed to get us almost working like Hong Kong Inc. now. We're in such tandem, lockstep with each other. The collaboration, it's off the charts, and you're not even seeing the benefits of that, but it's obviously you're reading South China Morning Post, seeing Chris Hoy in New York with Bloomberg and whatnot. But I wondered if you could share how you did that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't me. It was like the whole thing came together quite nicely. I think sometimes when there are big challenges, it brings people together. I would say that one of the most positive surprises that I had of working in the position at HKEX has been the amount of interaction and I would say like positive interaction that there's been between HKEX and all the regulatory bodies. So we have a bi-weekly meeting which is led by the financial secretary, but then also FSTB is there, the SFC is there, the HKMA is there, and we meet and we just discuss what are the things that can be fixed, how can we do it better, and I've seen everyone working very proactively to try to get things done. Now, many times there are a lot of other considerations, whether it's political or other, that needs to be taken into account. But the spirit of trying to get things done, to work, as a team, is there. And I was very, very fortunate to see that happen. And I think the one important message that I had for let's say the regulatory bodies and the government officials in Hong Kong in all these meetings was 2 things. One, we have to continue being more international. So I pushing that all the time, and being more international means being able to serve our clients around the world, being able to provide value added to them, because they have an option of investing anywhere in the world, and we have to provide, really good service to them. By the way, for everyone to know, Kevin is the one responsible of covering all the clients of HKEX around the world, and so he's been the one doing a really good job in making sure that people, know about our markets, know what we have to offer, and in terms of like the priorities that we put, making sure that we focus on what the clients, need has been, number 1 for us. We just need to make sure that we take care of the people that pays the bills. Those people are the people that are actually coming to invest, and if we need to attract them, we need to fight really hard every day to make sure that they choose Hong Kong. And so that was an important thing. The second thing was that I wanted to always make sure that everyone understood that we have a common objective. And when I was mentioning to the students here that, to see how the financial sector can help the real sector, that is very important. So this is not just like a bunch of like casino betting people that like want to like just like bet on something. This is like part of the real, value added to the economy. I mean, finance plays a very, very important role in generating a thriving society. And so we said, if we can, create a great market, we're going to help companies. We're going to help the people of Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, the percentage represented by the financial sector is very big. So we better be really, really, really good and competitive. And that's why I put so much pressure on you, sorry. I mean, it's
Okay, one more question. Come on. Oh, we have two. Okay. Okay, good. We probably have time
Thank
for
you.
two.
So speaking of the competitiveness of our local market, so in the past year, the Hong Kong and also the China market is being a little bit disappointing, I would say. And compared to other Asian market, they're doing well. So do you think it's a problem of our country? Do you think that's the problem of the market themselves, or it's simply that the companies that in our listing portfolios are not doing well? So how do you explain that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a number of factors. And I mentioned some of these factors while I was speaking. And let me just list what I believe are the most important ones. First of all, the let's say, geopolitical backlash that there is against China today is affecting the interest of investors to invest in the region. And therefore, they've been reallocating some of those portfolios. And people that used to have like a big chunk of their emerging markets in China, now they're investing in other places, whether it's India, Indonesia, even, redirecting some of that to Japan. So we have definitely seen that some of those funds are going to other markets, okay? Why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that as well. Some may be lack of understanding of the regulatory changes that are taking place, for example, in the mainland. Some of it may be just geopolitical pressure that people that invest in China have in their own countries. Why are you supporting China? Why are you investing in China? And we've seen a lot of that. So, there's a number of things that I bunch all of those things within like geopolitics, okay? That's number one. Number two, as we see increases in interest rates, especially Hong Kong has a situation where interest rates are linked to US dollar interest rates. Now, China interest rates are coming down, but Hong Kong is tied to the US. So, the opportunities, are once again, to invest in fixed income today is much more attractive. I can invest in fixed income at 5-6% with pretty much no risk. Short term, have the availability of the money and all that. So there's been a lot of money that had moved from equities into fixed income. And so when you have like the demand go down, because people don't want to necessarily invest in China, or people don't want to invest in equities, you're going to see that demand for equities come down, and the supply is actually pretty high because there's a lot of companies that want to offer shares, they want to offer and so there's a bit of an imbalance, and that's generating prices to come down. And but at some point it'll turn, because you know what, you have Hong Kong trading at 7-8 times, price to earnings ratio. The US is trading at 22-25. The growth rate of the companies that are trading at the Hong Kong exchange market is not lower than the growth rate of the US market or the European market. So at some point, that is not sustainable mathematically, okay? So that's why, we may see a bit more, tough environment, but I think we're like getting close to like the bottom, because there comes a point where just like the growth of the market, unless there's some kind of war or something, but other than that, it has to start like going up.
Hi, Martin here from UBS, former employee of Mr. Kevin Rideout, and a former student of Professor from USD. So thank you very much, Gucho, for sharing. That was a really inspiring sharing. And just now you mentioned that the finance industry is focused on making real impacts in the real economy. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice for junior like myself, to as in how do we equip ourselves, how to better educate ourselves to prepare for that course. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I recall, you're pretty well educated. I mean, it's like so. I think that financial markets are changing very quickly. I mean, and there's a number of factors that are important to take into account, and I'll mention a few. One, I mentioned the changing geographical weights that are happening, understanding, how maybe this part of the world, calling it Asia, will become more and more important. How can you take advantage of that? How can we have like the integration among Southeast Asia, China, Middle East? I mean, what are the opportunities for value creation that will be developed? So understanding the geopolitics, I think it's important, because I mean, it will allow you to focus on the areas of real opportunity. That's number one. Second one is the technology transformation that's going on around the world. And here you have to think about the impact of artificial intelligence, the impact of cloud, the impact of data, the impact of blockchain. I mean, all those things, and how is that going to affect the industry? And it's going to have a dramatic impact. So that may also allow you to focus on the right thing. And then the last thing that I would say is capital formation, and how that is also changing is very important. Veronique, you mentioned that companies are staying private for longer, which is true. I mean, what is the implication of that? How do we potentially think that will impact private equity? I mean, and companies themselves. I mean, and that will also be important to take into account. Companies are also deciding to list quite a bit locally, so they list in their local market, and they also do then also simultaneously an international offering. What is going to be the impact of that? And I'll add finally, it's related to technology, but from what I remember, you were working a lot in the digital infrastructure. Keep looking at that. I mean, it's like very, very, very good area to think about how technology will affect the way we trade today in our markets. We trade, and it takes 48 hours to settle. I mean, that's like way too long for something that should be instant. It should be immediate. I buy, you sell. I mean, you get the proof of your ownership, and I just deliver the payment instantly. Today it takes 48 hours. And so we've been making some changes. We improved at least the IPO cycle. It used to be 5 days, now it's 2 days. So, but I mean, I think if I look at the future, eventually in 10 years, 15 years, it'll be all instantly. People will be able to trade any assets in any platform, and making sure that we have a digital representation of all the assets will be very, very important. And that also comes to the point of when I had the meeting with Ronnie here, he asked me about trading during typhoons, and I mean, yeah. I mean, it's and I mentioned at that point that given COVID, I hope that we learn how to operate in an environment where people can safely do a lot of the tasks from home. And there's been a lot of work done. I mean, a lot of progress. There was a consultation that took place, and it was concluded in December. And the exchange, I mean, at least up until I was there, they were working on making sure that they published the conclusions of that consultation. And so hopefully by next typhoon season, we'll have the ability to trade uninterrupted.
Wow. So fantastic discussion. I think we are at the end of our discussion. Is that correct, Alice? Okay. Thank you. I hand over to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you both. This was fabulous. Thank you, Veronique and Gucho. And there is a reception, so please join us in LQW room so you can continue to grow both of them about, the topics that you're interested in. But I'm really grateful. Thank you, Gucho. When I asked
you.
him, he said yes right away, and it's he's never disappointed us. And we're wishing you all the success, you and Ines, and you're part of the Asia Society Global family. So
Thank you. And just like about the Asia Society, I mentioned about HKEX being a connector of East and West. And the role that Asia Society is playing is also quite amazing about, generating those bridges internationally. And it's such a great organization. Of course, I'm a bit biased because I'm a trustee, but it is a great organization. For those of you that are not members, please become a member. And,
thank you. I didn't ask him to say that. He did it on his own. I'm well trained. But thank you all for being with us. But thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at future programs. There's going to be a lot of stuff. And one of the great thing about Asia Society during this time of, you were talking about geopolitical tension. And by the way, Chris Hui spoke at Asia Society in New York last week when he was there. So we have centers around the world, and I think this is the role that we are going to continue to play. And so we look for thank you for your support. But there's going to be some great program coming up. In fact, Dennis Wilder, former CIA, and now at Georgetown. I think before we were talking about the lack of exchanges with universities these days. We will have Dennis Wilder speaking for us. He's coming in from Georgetown in also in May 20th, right before Jamie. So there's going to be a lot of great speakers coming up. They want to be here in person, and Asia Society Hong Kong will be here to host them. So look forward to seeing you at future programs. Join us at LQW Lee Kuo Wei Room for a drink. Thank you.